go ahead and get started. Again, I know a number of other people had registered for the session, and other people may pop in. I don't know about you, but it took me a few minutes to find that session information, and it is being recorded, so we can share this as well. Well, we are excited to talk with you this morning. My name is Kristen, Ireland. I am joined by Erin.
Hello, everyone. I'm Erin Mies.
And we are Peoplespark Consulting. We'll talk a little bit more about us on that next slide, but the goal of our presentation today is really about making changes stick. And especially, and I'm sure you will hear me say this multiple times throughout the session today, but especially in early stages of a business, starting up a business, this is a key way to really drive the culture that you want to have in your business. So while we're talking about it in terms of changes, this is also can be used to be your starting point, right? So you can define what you want that behavior in your culture to be right as you start bringing people on board. So we'll talk about it in both ways. Again, I'm sure you'll hear me talk about it more. I was really excited to be part of the Food and Ag track for Startup Week, because that meant that I got to do pictures with all sticky foods. So the honey may not be appealing, but some of these others might be a little bit more appealing. So as I mentioned, Kristen and Erin, we are co-founders of Peoplespark. We are a human resources consulting company that really works with small to mid-sized businesses to achieve their business goals through their human resources strategy. So how are you really leveraging your culture to drive the growth that you need to have and the success that you want to have, achieve those goals that you have in your business? We started Peoplespark Consulting about two and a half years ago, started full-time on the business in January of 2019, and it's been a fun ride since. And we'll be able to talk about some of the things that we did even as we started moving in to some of these changes and making changes stick. So we are talking about change, and that's really going to be our focus. Anybody, if you could type in the chat, anybody going through change right now?
Personally or professionally?
Right. Right? So I am, yes, for sure, going through changes. Personally, holy crap, my kids are every day, right? My kids are home half time. My husband's working from home. I mean, that's a change too. Professionally, we have to work very differently than we did before, because I don't know if you've heard, but we're in the middle of a pandemic. But it has adjusted how we operate and how we do business using technology more, things like that, right? So change is happening every day. Now, we talked about this in terms of personal or professional, but have you been part of a broad change effort? And I know Erin will love this picture here because she is a gummy bears kind of girl. But have you been involved in a large change effort? And this could be totally professional, you know, this is a professional setting, either part of it in a larger organization or leading the change. So as you're looking at your business and leading your business, have you tried to drive changes in your organization, whether it's the behaviors that your employees are showing, what you want your customers to do? So how many of you have been involved? And again, you can chat this in. How many of you have been involved in those types of changes in the past? You can chat in on that, because I'm going to go with too many to count. And
yeah, and we've seen this, you know, with systems changes, right? Within a business, when you're changing systems that you're using, or changing things like incentive plans, or just the way that you do your work, even recently prior to COVID, even a lot of the changes with what do office environments look like? What do they feel like? I know that there's been a lot of that happening in the Twin Cities as well.
Mm-hmm. Right? So all of those changes are happening. And what has happened? What has the result been for a number of those changes? I know for me personally, and again, you can share this in chat, for me personally, being a part of those changes, seeing seeing the vision that leaders wanted to have in the change and not seeing that change happen, not seeing people changing their behaviors or having people really struggle with making those changes. You know, for Erin, talking about the systems, moving to a new system and having people on the old system as long as they possibly can until the day they shut off, right? So in many cases, those changes are not sticking, right? They're not getting the results that organizations and businesses want to have them achieve, right? Now, they're not achieving the goal of that change. So we approach this at Peoplespark using the influencer model, and I'm actually going to show this here because I have it. This is a book. It's one of our favorite books. We are not getting any kind of a kickback for sharing the book. We should, because we talk about it a lot. But this book has been key to us rethinking how we look at change, how we drive behavior changes so that they really make a difference, that they really stick. So this model that we'll go through more specifically, we'll walk through each of these steps, actually starts on the right-hand side. So it starts with the clarifying measurable results. What do you want to have happen, right? For us at Peoplespark, when I think about clarifying the measurable results, we had financial goals that we wanted to hit. Those were some of the measurable results we wanted to achieve. We have worked with businesses, and I think as a number of food and ag businesses, if you're working in food production, safety is going to be a key thing to think about. So maybe your measurable results are things like zero safety, right? No reports that need to be made. Or a certain amount. Maybe it's reducing by 5% or 10% from what it had been in the past. In food production, again, quality is going to be a huge one. So is there a quality result that you want to have happen? But what are the measurable results that you want to see? Increasing customer sales. Then you follow the analyze to go back to figure out what are those vital behaviors? What are the most important things that people can do, employees can do to drive those behaviors? Once you know what those vital behaviors are, and we'll talk about this more, but we're talking one or two. We're not talking like a brainstormed list, but what are the most impactful things that somebody can do? Then we look at that in terms of these 6 sources of influence, right? So you'll notice there's personal motivation, personal ability, social motivation, social ability, structural motivation, and structural ability. So what can you do in each of those buckets? And when you execute that, you will find people doing those vital behaviors and then hitting those measurable results, right? Getting those returns. So that is the overall process that we'll walk through. Again, strongly recommend the book because as we go through it here, the book is fascinating because it's not a typical business book. There are examples that they use that are outside of the business setting that really put a whole new perspective on it. And after applying this model to change efforts, as Erin says, we do a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking, right? Of looking back and being like, oh, I know what we did wrong if we only would have done it this way. So that's where we are going to head. This is how we'll tie it together. So we are going to take all of these and apply them into tips. And we'll jump into the tips with actually, no. We're going to talk about the impact. Then we're going to jump into the specific tips. So the concept behind these 6 sources, and again, the 6 sources need to drive to a specific behavior. But the concept is if you can use at least 4 of the 6, your chances for success of making the change that you want to make, of seeing the behaviors you want to see, go up 10%. I mean, that's huge. And that's only 4 of the 6. Think about the impact you could have if you can get up to 5 or 6 of these. But that's the goal that we're trying to get to, is making all of this stickier. And as I look at this picture, I think of stickier because I think of my kids and how that ice cream used to drip all the way down their hands. It was a cringe moment and also made me crave ice cream. So the first tip number 1, and I'm going to ask you to share what your vital behaviors would be, right? So you want to think about the things. I want you to start thinking about the things that you want to accomplish in your business and what behaviors would drive it. And when you think about the specific behaviors, remember I said it should align with the measurable results that you want to see, and it should be 1 or 2. This is not a lot, one or two. And a lot of people have a hard time defining what that would be. What we recommend is look at the people who are doing it well. Who are your rock star people on safety? What are they doing? Who are your rock star people on customer service? What are they doing? So think about who your rock stars are and what specific behaviors they are coming up with. One example that I use, I said we'd talk a little bit more about our journey as well. One of our goals was financial goals. I can tell you that one of the key behavior, if we just focused on this one behavior, it would make a difference in hitting our financial goals. Prospecting, right? Finding those new clients, reaching out and connecting with people, but prospecting would be, still is, right? A vital behavior in identifying and reaching our financial goals. So as you think about your goals, what you want to accomplish, what are some behaviors, and type these in chat, what are some behaviors that you feel would really drive those results? As you think about that, I'm going to give a few more. I used safety and quality as examples. One of the common behaviors that I see a lot in safety and quality is to say something. If you see something, say something. If you see an unsafe act, report it. If you see a quality issue, report it, right? So for me, if I were to think about a specific behavior around quality and safety, is saying something is the key to making that happen. Erin, what are your other thoughts on tips around specific behaviors and vital behaviors?
I think the main part of it is to not overthink what the behavior is, because I think a lot of times, and especially even what you see in the book as you go through it as well, is that those vital behaviors aren't necessarily some really big, huge goal that feels very amorphous and very vague. It instead is something very concrete. And it is truly a vital behavior, like a very small thing. It is a number of farm gate calls every week. It is, how many times am I getting on the phone with someone in a safety or production? It's how many times am I able to bring forward ideas or concerns in Kristen's example there. So I think my main piece of advice there is to not overthink it, where it is truly a specific behavior. And if it feels too broad, where you can't really define it very well, then I would say you're probably not there yet. Go further and go a little bit deeper. Take the layer off one additional level.
That was a great reminder, because it reminded me of a conversation that we had with a number of dealers and retail locations looking at increasing customer retention and sales per ticket within their stores, their store and retail locations. And the vital behavior is using the customer's name, which sounds so basic and so simple. But the reason it is a vital behavior is because it is the foundation that leads to more. Getting somebody to find out a customer's name usually doesn't end there. Then you usually get to knowing more about the customer, right? It leads to more conversations. Knowing more about the customer, finding out their pets' names, finding out the issues that they're having with their pets, maybe that their pet is older or having stomach issues. So they're able to better direct them to the products. And it all started with knowing their name. So knowing your customer name was a huge vital behavior. And like Erin said, that's not large, lofty, that is simple. That can also have such a difference on whether or not customers come back to your store and whether or not you're able to sell more to them while they're there. All right, the next one is tying it to your goals. Do you like here? I used the picture of the healthy sticky food, thinking about tying to goals, right? So this is that block. When you looked at that upper left-hand corner of the 6 sources, it was personal motivation. This is tying it to why it's important. This is telling somebody why they should do this. So it's tying it to your overall business goals. So you're not just coming back to somebody and saying like, hey, use the customer name, right? You're explaining like the more we use customer names, the more it will increase customer retention, right? The more it creates an environment where customers want to come into us. Tying it to, you know, the farm gate calls, the prospecting calls, the customer calls, if you're trying to increase sales, talk about it in terms of what you're trying to accomplish as the organization, not just that you're telling the person to do it. What we have found with leaders here is leaders can be very passionate about why it's important. But then leaders also feel, and you may feel this as the leader of a startup organization, right? You have in your head what your business wants to accomplish, what goals you have, and you can speak to it so well. But what I've seen happen is that's where leaders stop. Like I told them why it's important, and I told them what to do, so they're just going to do it. No, right? It's one of 6, but you can't stop there, right? Erin, any additional adds on the tying it to your goals?
I would say it doesn't stop there. Make sure that you're connecting it into how somebody can do that every single day. So similar to kind of keeping it simple with defining that specific behavior, bring it into what are the things that they do every day and how does it impact it? Make those connections for others. A lot of times they might be able to see it on their own, but don't make that assumption all the time. Make sure that you're going to the level of explaining how this one behavior results in a certain type of action that is en route to the goals that you're after as an organization.
Erin, you have a fascinating statistic you like to share about how many employees know.
Yeah. So 44%. Yeah, 44% of all employees do not know how the work they do every single day ties in to the business goals and where the business is heading. So close to half of your employees. So if you've only got a team of 2, make sure that you've got that connection made for others. And sometimes though you might be redundant and that you've already said it, they should know this by now. Part of that role as a leader is to make sure that you are continuously talking about the message and the goal that you're after. So even though you might feel like a broken record, part of that repetition, part of that experience helps to make sure that others are understanding where you're going and why, and they're keeping that focus on that path as well.
Yes, definitely. And yes, Paul, it is said that the number is so high. But what's also interesting is, yes, that number is high. Leaders don't see that. Leaders assume since they know that their employees know. And that's where I think as you're looking at scaling a business and growing a business, you know, you may have 2, make sure that you share it. When you add on a third that hasn't been there for as long or hasn't seen that vision, make sure that you are overly communicating, because that's where you can start to lose that. Is the bigger you get, the less you're starting to communicate that, and the further people get away from seeing what they do every day, the behavior that you want to see, and how it ties to your goals.
Exactly.
All right. And tip 3, because it is campfire season. Every season is campfire season. We have our s'mores here. Tip 3 is to create space for practice, or for that behavior, for that practice. And technically, when you look at the model, this is about personal ability. This is where training usually comes in, right? And so people will say things like, oh, I want them to do this behavior. I want them to have high customer service. I'm going to send them to customer service training. Done. Or I want them to do this behavior. I want to send them to this training. And they consider that good. But you'll notice here where we are focusing on this stronger is it's not the training, it's the practice. It's the words coming out of their mouths, right? I have gotten to the point now, I have 11-year-old daughters. There's a lot of drama in our house. And we spend a lot of time talking about interactions that they have with friends and others. And we would talk through it, which I would consider training. And what I learned is that didn't make a difference. So now I actually have them repeat it back to me. So here is what, here, let's talk about what you can say. Now I want those words to come out of your mouth. Tell me what you're going to say to them. Erin and I work a lot with managers who are learning skills about how to give feedback. right? I would say if you're looking at increasing the engagement of your team, clarifying measurable results, a vital behavior is managers coaching and providing feedback consistently to employees. Then when you get to personal ability, it's not just sending them to manager training or supervisor training, but it's giving them that opportunity to not only learn what they need to do, but practice it, have the words come out of their mouth, have it become a muscle rather than just a learning and kind of a brain thing. It needs to be a muscle thing. Erin, what other thoughts would you add?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, where we've seen a lot of powerful movement happen with companies is when they have an opportunity to, as a team, even if it's just two people that are going through, if they are attending a training, if they're going through it together, but then they're given that space to practice with one another. So it could be even just in preparation for an employee conversation. It could be in preparation for a board meeting, whatever that might be for that skill. Practice for a sales call, even practicing the words coming out of their mouth, practicing that behavior, practicing the action. So happens, there's more muscle memory that kicks in. It's not something I have to think through and analyze as I'm going, which is what we do as startups a lot of times, is that we're flying the airplane. We're flying the airplane and building it at the same time in a lot of cases. Mm-hmm. So taking that moment, giving yourself that space for practice can only help that.
Mm-hmm. All right, now I'm going to kick it over to Erin to talk about the remaining tips. Oh, this makes me so hungry.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I think we're all going to need a snack after this today. Yeah. So the next two tips are really around that middle tier. So if you remember, it was a 2x3 grid that Kristen showed at the very beginning. And in the middle is around social ability and social motivation. What's interesting is that if these two items, so we mentioned that using 4 or more increases your chance at success more than 10 times. The two in the middle around social motivation and social ability are the most critical ones that are often overlooked. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a moment. But role modeling the behavior, so going back to that vital behavior around, it could be around preparation for a sales call. It could be a discussion with an employee that we're going to give feedback. Your vital behavior might be that I'm going to talk with my employees 1 time a week or have a check-in at least once a week. If that behavior is not being role modeled by the leader, by the manager, there's a much greater chance that change does not stick. And I know what I'm saying is not necessarily rocket science here, but it's something that I think oftentimes, especially as leaders, where we've made the change, we're moving on to the next thing, that we're not staying in that same space to make sure that we're still role modeling for our employees around how we want that behavior to continue moving forward.
And
Kristen, what would you add there?
Well, and what I would add too is, especially as you grow, right? A lot of times when organizations are growing, right, you have 1 or 2 that are starting the business, then you start to bring in, the people that are actually doing the work, like the food production, then you start to bring in more of the middle management, right? You're starting to bring in more supervisors and leaders here. When we talk about role modeling the behavior, that isn't just you. That is all of your leaders. And I think a lot of times leaders forget that of, okay, I am going to, we need to do this. I am going to role model this behavior. And then they don't hold their leaders that report to them accountable to that role modeling as well. Or leaders in that role see, oh, okay, well, so they're doing it, so I'm not going to worry about it, right? But this is making sure as you are making a change that your leaders of your employees are role modeling that behavior and that they understand how critical of a part they play. As I think back about a lot of organization-wide initiatives, I would say one of the biggest reasons that they weren't as successful as they could have been is that some of the middle management, some of the leaders in between tapped out of that responsibility.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And where I've seen it show up has been in some of my manufacturing experiences where, we have great initiatives. We're getting ready to move forward. We've got all the training done. We have people understand why we're doing it. They know what the behavior is. And then we have some of our supervisors, some of our managers who don't want to deal with it and who just kind of ignore it. And so that change, that behavior is never something that is given feedback. And so they're not following up, they're not holding others accountable to that behavior. And so now it becomes acceptable. Now it's permissible that I don't get on board with that particular change. And so now it's not okay for me, which moving into tip number 5
Well,
means that
this is one of my favorite quotes in relation to that. Right?
Exactly. And so if I am a leader, I'm not holding my team members accountable. So that's, tip number 4. But as I look and see as an employee that there's other teams, that there's other employees that are in similar roles to me who are not being held accountable, and I'm seeing that they don't need to do it, guess what? I'm not going to need to do it either. And so it's kind of the opposite of peer pressure, in a way where, well, it is a type of peer pressure, but more around if somebody else isn't doing it, looks like I don't need to do it either. And so then you take away a lot of that momentum that you otherwise could be building up within that group. Because if a leader is holding others accountable, is being very intentional, like the slide shows, that this behavior is something that we're going to follow through on. Okay, now I know what's expected of me. And then Kristen, if you move forward one more, and if I'm seeing that my peers are also doing it, it becomes much less acceptable. And I start to stand out now as an outlier of somebody who's not choosing to get on board with that particular behavior. And so I'm kind of left a little bit more exposed, if you will, for not following through with that behavior.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, and I think the other key here is giving them the opportunity to see what other people are doing. Who are your rock stars? What are they doing? And what can they do to help others? So who is somebody who learned the system change? Who is somebody who learned the system really well? And can you partner them up? Who is the person who's using customer names like you wouldn't believe and building these customer relationships? Can you connect them with somebody that's struggling with that?
And are you recognizing them too, which we'll get to that here in a moment. But providing feedback is really, it goes in 2 different directions. There's the giving recognition. I know a lot of times we think about feedback in terms of constructive feedback, but it also comes back to giving recognition. And so we're going to share with you our favorite tool for using it, and our favorite framework, which is called BIT. And so it has its origins in, I think, the University of Southern California back in the 80s with it, but it's around behavior, identifying what the behavior is, sharing what the impact of that behavior is, and what you want to see going forward tomorrow. So BIT, BIT feedback. And so how this would show up, we've got a couple of examples just to walk you through it. And what I'll say is that we probably put too many words into it. It could be as basic as 3 sentences around, Kristen, I really appreciate the way that you got us kicked off this morning, even when I was having some technical difficulties. The impact was that we were able to start on time and start getting some momentum so that people didn't have to wait on me. Thank you. Keep it up. Let's rock on. So it could be super quick as you get more accustomed to using the framework. So here's an example for you.
And I just want to say here, that is an example of Erin with muscle memory, because that was not planned. She came up with BIT feedback right here. And it's because she's practiced it enough. The words have come out of her mouth enough that it's muscle memory to come through. So I wanted to recognize you for that. Thank you, Erin.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. So in this situation, we've got Kayla, who was doing some additional work and went above and beyond. So this is for recognition. So Kayla, I wanted to talk to you about the work that you did to identify funding sources. You took the initiative to research other opportunities. You identified those best options, and you submitted the right information for us. Okay, so we've identified very specifically what Kayla did. As a result, we received more than $20,000 in additional capital. And with that, we can now invest in the equipment that we need to continue scaling and meeting our customer demands. Thank you. So we go a little bit beyond thank you here, but with your creativity and initiative, I am really excited to see what you do next to continue driving growth within our business. right? So we get really crisp and really clear around what it was that Kayla did. We talk about the impact, and then we move in forward around, just keep it up. I want to see more of this. And when it comes to recognition, in a lot of cases, we often talk about the behavior. So maybe, but we talk about, hey, this is really cool what you did. Keep it up. Where you can really elevate your own recognition is making sure that you take that time to talk about the impact. So what was the impact that that particular behavior made on someone? When that employee remembered that customer's name, what was the impact of that? And it could be, gosh, I saw them smile when you used their name and as they were coming in the door without prompting, without anything else like that. And that's the type of relationship we want to build with our customers and in our community. On the flip side, we mentioned that this is a twofer, that you can use BIT for both recognition and constructive feedback. What I love, love, love about BIT is that it helps take emotion out of particularly tough or more challenging situations when you have to address constructively a behavior with an employee. And so in this situation, Kayla was not doing so well. So we're going to address it here. So Kayla, I want to talk with you about the information that you provided to investors. Couple things. You waited till the last minute to prepare the report, and you didn't double check the numbers that you included. Okay, so we're really specific. We're telling her why we're meeting with her, but then we're also giving her 2 specific things that happened, that she waited till the last minute and then didn't double check what happened. And we're not stopping there, because that's the behavior. Now we are getting further into, why does it even matter? So Kayla might be like, I met the deadline, no big deal. What we're talking about here with her is that investors pointed out the errors in the meeting. Another impact was that I was put on the spot and I wasn't able to provide the necessary answers, because I'm trusting that the information that you've put together was accurate. It didn't make me look good. It didn't make the business look good. And some of our investors have lost confidence in us. Okay, so there's a much bigger impact than you just need to meet a deadline. Tomorrow, going forward, the work that you do is critical to our success. And I expect that you're making sure that all that information is accurate when you create the reports, and that you're allowing enough time to double check that work before the report is submitted. Okay, so we're being very clear. We're not talking about, anything that is really subjective around a attitude or around, this happened or this didn't happen. We're getting really clear on what the behavior was with Kayla and what the impact was, so that she knows really clearly what needs to be different for that next investor meeting. On the flip side, if I look at BIT for recognition, the thing about the tomorrow part is that you're telling somebody specifically what they did that you want to see them repeat. On the constructive side, you're telling someone very clearly what you don't want them to repeat and what needs to look different moving forward. We love BIT. We use it all the time. Encourage you to try. If you need practice with it, try it with your kids. Try it on recognition. Our challenge to all of our participants is to practice this on recognition. Look for those examples, and oftentimes there's recognition opportunities all around us. It's a matter of taking a moment to pause and look for those things and call them out, call out that impact. Because if you practice with recognition, it makes your recognition even that much more powerful with your team member, with your family member, with whomever. And you start building the muscle memory that Kristen was talking about for the framework, so that when you need to use it in a situation of giving constructive, that behavior impact tomorrow starts flowing a lot more easily. All right, our last tip here is around looking around. And this one is one that is beside BIT, I would say is probably one of my favorites, because oftentimes, especially if we're making a change in behaviors, there are structural things all around us that may or may not reinforce or emphasize the type of behavior we want to see. So in Kristen's earlier example, very early on, what she was talking about was a change in a system, for as an example. And she has a great example of where we were changing from a paper and pencil system in a particular company to a computer-based one. And employees were not using the computer-based system, but they needed to. They kept trying to use the book. They wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do it. Well, what they found was that they would, if they moved the computer to where the book was, where they physically would have to go, that was enough to change the behavior, right? So look around you structurally around what is in place. What are the signals? What are the signs around me that would prevent somebody from making that change? How am I making it easy for somebody to get on the bus, and easy for somebody to, and almost automatic if you can, for them to go in the direction that we want for them to go? And it makes it really difficult for them to revert back to the old way, the old behavior.
So a couple
Kristen, what would you add?
Well, a couple of thoughts on this. One, a great example of this is manufacturing facilities that has days since last reportable injury on the wall. That tells you, that's driving the behavior, that tells you that safety is important to them, right? But my favorite right now, I shouldn't say favorite, is you see this everywhere with social distancing. The stickers on the floor in Target telling you how far
Yes.
apart to stand at the register are great examples of looking around, right? So it's what is your, and what we have found in other cases too is that that people aren't making the connection between what they want to have as an organization and what may be impeding people, right? Like saying you have an open door policy, but you're never in your office. Saying that you have an open door policy and that you're open to conversations, and every time somebody comes to you, they shut you, or you kind of shut them down. But there are different ways. When you start to look around, you're like, oh, that's not helpful. I'm actually encouraging them to not do what I want them to do.
Exactly. Exactly. So just to recap us, if we move to the next slide, the influencer model. So what we did here, if you remember, we started with the end in mind. We start with what the results are that we want as a business leader, as a business owner, and then try to derive out from there, what are the one or two vital behaviors that if we do these things, the results are going to come. We know that these are the behaviors that have to happen in order to get those results. And then we use those vital behaviors, so prospecting calls, calling a customer by name, and now we apply those 6 sources of influence that we took you through in each of the tips to look at how can we move beyond a training or a training and giving feedback. What additionally can we be doing within that, with that vital behavior in mind, to help reinforce it, to get after the results that we're truly seeking? So again, just to recap, we start with the behavior. Okay, so far so good. It doesn't feel like it's overwhelming at this point, right? Now we're creating practice, space for practice in tip number 3. We might be doing some training. We might be offering up just some peer-to-peer work that's happening so we can get building that muscle memory. Then we start moving into the social motivation and ability around looking at how others are modeling the behavior. Are we reinforcing it through our supervisors? And if as our organization grows, that we're role modeling it at all, and that we're showing that all of our employees, that all of our team members, that we're either teaching one another and that we're also exhibiting that behavior, to where if you're not exhibiting the behavior, it actually starts to look a little unusual because everybody else is on board, right? Then we're giving feedback, we're giving recognition, and we're giving constructive feedback to reinforce the behavior that we want to see in that situation overall. And now we're looking around at our environment and saying, what additional signals, whether it's physical signals or other process signals, are we offering up that are going to help support and make that change, make that behavior almost automatic for our employees? So Some next steps for you. This is a topic, I don't know if you could tell, but this is a topic that we get really excited about. This is truly a model that we use every day in our business with our clients. And we invite you to schedule a consult session with us. We have a special link that's set up here just for Twin Cities Startup Week that you can go to out on Calendly. It's at people-spark/TCSW 2020. And we invite you to bring your questions and let's talk about, that behavior that you're looking at implementing within your own business and how you might be able to consider reinforcing it using those 6 sources of influence to make your change stick in your organization. Kristen, what else would you add?
Oh, nope. I think you covered that well. But I did have to laugh when you were talking about we use it every day. I was just using it this morning with the client.
And I'll keep that slide up here just for a moment if there's questions that are in the group that we can answer while we're here live. So we'll keep that up. And then in the meantime, we want to thank all of you for attending this morning, for participating in the chat, and hope that this is something where, there's one little nugget, or maybe there's more than one nugget that you took away from this. But I think if nothing else, change doesn't have to be super overwhelming or such a huge thing. There's really a lot of signals and a lot of things that you can do within your own power, regardless of the size of your company, to help make that change stick. That is very practical and very much easy to apply within your business.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thanks everyone for attending.
Have a good day.